I want to apologize. I learned last night that some of our links are down on the website. I don't know how that happened, but I brought that to Jimmy and Anthony's attention. They're going to fix it today, and we're working on it. We've come a long way with our technology, but it is still in the end technology. So welcome. This is First Center for Spiritual Living on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Again, we're using all these platforms, and I'm happy to hear that our audience is growing. Today I'm going to be working with a Barker talk, which was initially called The Forward Look, and I've been working with it for a couple days now. It was an excessive 50, 60 pages, so condensing his work has been my challenge. It's great stuff. Any of this material you can find on our website, by the way. We have Raymond Charles Barker's best talks. We have a good deal of Dr. Stuart Grayson, Dr. Bill Tolliver, who I think you might love if you have an opportunity to listen to. And we have a good number of Rev Wade's, and we're going to be putting more up. So let the morning begin. I try not to watch the news, okay, as most of you know. I was told in my early 30s that the news is rarely good, and while I might want to be aware of things going on in life, I don't want to be bombarded with negative stories because they will begin to overshadow the goodness of life, which is everywhere present, which we teach. And it's rarely talked about. The goodness of life, really is the thing to be talking about. And it's rarely talked about and never talked about that I see if you go to any of the major news stations. Our minds are trained, Dr. Barker said, to go to the negative. And that kind of struck me this week as I was preparing this lesson. Our minds have been trained to go to the negative. Be aware of that. That was kind of like a startling revelation. I don't know why, because I teach it all the time. There's all this negativity that we're clearing out and we're neutralizing. And yet, just that simple statement that our minds are trained to go there. And his suggestion was be aware of that. So after a few minutes of that kind of information and a few minutes of reading, watch the news a little bit. I usually choose to redirect my consciousness towards what we call bigger ideas, more expansive ideas that can take me potentially to places of healing, healing myself and possibly others. So this is the call this morning in the talk to level up. And level up what? Level up you. And to step out of the stories that will proclaim disaster and the end of times and the end of America and the end of the world, because that stuff won't take you where you want to go. So we focus on wholeness and unity and health. We can lift our minds up and commit to developing positive expectancy, where we actually expect something good to happen. And we will inform you here or remind you that the universe responds to your direction. That's very important. The universe responds to your direction. Your positive expectancy will begin to shape your coming days in life, which is why every Thursday I ask that question, what has it been like being you? And I'm never looking for the story. We all have the story of what happened, but I'm looking for people to become mindful of what it is, the inner dialogue inside of them that really is creating their life. So Thursday, we take a look at that. We eliminate the negatives, and we pay attention to what we're spinning within ourselves. So this morning, I was thinking, as I was preparing the lesson, how long has it been since you were living in a place where you were living in a place like that, where you absolutely expected life was working out for your best? Are you expecting something good to happen? How long has it been since you were living in a place where you absolutely expected life was working out for your best? And I know many are not there yet. If you're not there, just notice. We're going to help you to come to that place. That's what we do here. It's the reason we're here, to remind you of the truth and to help you learn to fly and help you to level up. Next question, have you been creating a world where nothing and no one is working against you? That's a question that comes out of the integral growth model from Gary Simmons and others. Have you been creating a world where nothing and no one is working against you? Because we have a tendency to blame it on other people. And I want you to take it back and ask yourself, have you been creating a world where nothing and no one is working against you? We're trying to get people to own their own lives. Louise would have said we're each 100% responsible for all of our life experiences. So we really try to avoid going towards other people, doing the blame game. We're authors of our own experience, and we're here to claim our lives and realize that we are creators in our life. All of this is a big leveling up process when you get out of the blame game. And it requires a degree of self-mastery, remembering, and awakening. That's why people join in our community and participate in our classes and gatherings. We're not here to coddle anybody. We're not, of course, we care about your feelings, but we're here to stimulate your growth and to encourage you to grow. This is the teaching that can take you there, to a place of greater self-mastery. Some of you are experiencing this. Some of you have had it, where you have a sense like, I am it, and I know that I got it, and I know that I know. And you're in the groove, and you've had this thing called life down, and you've had it down maybe for a while. And some of you still are there, and you're just manifesting, wonderful experiences day after day after day. That, however, is not the story of most of you listening to this call, and many of the people who are hearing it for the first time in our extended platforms. Many of you just don't yet know this, so we're trying to impart that information to give you a step and give you a way to level up. How long has it been since you have lived in a place where you absolutely expected good things to happen? Big question. How are you at that? Are you absolutely expecting good things to happen? I told you a minute ago something that's, again, pretty profound to me, even as I'm saying it this morning. Our minds are trained to go to the negative. That's from Raymond Charles Barker. And I suggested a moment ago, as he did, learn to be aware of that. Catch yourself when you go there. It's a little bit of a trick that you've got to do. Because it's easy to go to the negative. It's what everybody does. It's really a huge commitment to do it the other way. If we're ever to get back to the garden, that was my generation of Woodstock, if we're ever to get back there or get into the place where we want to be, where hoping for it to change will never be enough. We never talk about hope here in that sense. We talk about expectancy. Really leveling up to that place where we expect things to work out well. That's a little bit of effort. How long has it been since you really expected to live with that kind of expectancy, that kind of positive expectancy? And I know today somewhere someone will be listening thinking, I've never heard or never had that kind of life. I always expect things to go to hell. And people think that they're doomed, and they think that life is hard, and things are tough, and money is scarce, and that their life is really a veil of sorrows. They think a lot of things that are very, very down type of thoughts. And for those of you who are like that, I'm glad that you found us today, and I'm glad somehow the universe conspired to bring you here. You have a cosmic date. And we will tell you that the universe is always giving all of us green lights. And for the third time today, and perhaps the last, our minds are trained to go to the negative. Be aware of that. Just so you know that this is the way it is, and this is the stuff we work with. Be aware of it not because we want to dwell on the negative, but we want to realize that sometimes we work against ourselves. Often we work against ourselves. We intend here in this teaching to learn to be, the expression is, the guardian at the gate. We're here to really be the person that says, no, 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 cancel, cancel, next thought, cancel this thought. That's our job as evolving truth students, is to refute, neutralize, and replace those types of thoughts, which seem to be our training, as Dr. Barker said. We intend to be the guardians at the gate of all of that, neutralize this type of self-talk and negative chatter of doom, gloom, negative forecasting. I can have the kind of life that dreams are made of. The universe is never holding back on you. You can have this kind of life. There's not a lot of us living that way as of yet, as you probably have noticed. We come here to learn how to develop a certain self-mastery and a certain confidence, how to acquire a certain confidence. And this isn't ego or anything like it. It's the kind of confidence is born out of knowledge, self-knowledge and truth. Elevated thinking and understanding of who you are in the scheme of things. So I'm inviting you to join with me today and absolutely, absolutely expect something wonderful to happen. And I'm saying that to each of us. Again, the universe is giving us green lights. There's really nothing stopping us ever, except, yourself. In fact, whether we know it or not, all the universe is unfolding and conspiring for you to evolve and grow. I fondly remember Ralph Waldo Emerson saying, "The dice of God are always loaded." And really, it was a scary statement when I was a kid, but now it's comforting, meaning that all things in the universe are conspiring for your good. Always has been, always will be. You might say to yourself today, I'm willing to expand. I'm willing to grow past my past thinking and conditioning. To do this, we open up our minds and let go of old concepts that certainly don't serve us anymore. Please consider this and please let it happen. Say, I'm willing to let go of it, all of it, any of it. Here's an important idea to understand. It's simple, but you really have to get it. Everything that happens in our lives happens through us. Now, I know the science mind ministers and practitioners on the call understand that, but it's important that the rest of us get it. Everything that happens in our lives happens through us. You might have this enormous, beautiful idea about a project, about your future, your family, your dreams, and it's all possible, but it cannot manifest without your consciousness being in alignment with that bigger idea. Nothing happens for you and unless it happens through you. So you have to expand your mentality so there's an acceptance within you of these greater themes, or you will subconsciously reject them. In other words, your consciousness has to expand to a place where you can really accept the good and demonstrate the good in your life. If there's a pattern within you that is lacking faith or lacking belief, it will derail your bigger ideas. Everything that happens for you has to happen through your consciousness. If you want to really go for elevated consciousness and leveling up, as we're talking about today, stepping up and manifest the life of your dreams, you can do that. But there's going to be some letting go then of ideas, concepts, blocks, programming, blind spots, whatever it is that has prevented us from living and demonstrating the lives that we really have come here to experience and live. Nothing happens, nothing materializes in the world for us unless there is an acceptance within. It was simply taught to me years ago with this one line: like attracts like. So if it exists within me, there's an acceptance of a bigger life. It will, you draw it to you. But if there's something within you that's rejecting it, it simply won't demonstrate. You might think of it as a powerful nucleus, this thing that you have within you, consciousness that's building up, and it will come forth in your world. It has to. So let's take a minute and consider it. Maybe we'll be still. Take all these ideas into consciousness. our subconscious, so we can be at work, so it can be work for us even now as we're together. We're still in this perfect moment, this beautiful moment, quieted down. We recognize there is one cause, one mind, one intelligence, one action of good, one infinite creative spirit or cause. It's in all and through all of us. Listening. And even as we think it, we know mind in me is pure cause. Mind in me is unlimited opportunity, unlimited good. So in my individual world, I now expect something good, something greater than which has been before, something wonderful, something beautiful in my own individual world. Something that's fun, something that's full of joy. All right, subconscious mind, you have it and you do it. So now I'm going to get into the rest of the talk. I figured that was a talk. Barker had very lengthy talks. I want to expand on the ideas, though, of leveling up, taking your thinking up a notch or two. Much of the inspiration, again, comes from his talk, The Look Forward, today. Pared down and rearranged, but I give him credit for a great deal of today. Right thinking has always been the key to the whole thing, said Barker. I'll repeat that. Right thinking has always been the key to the whole thing. There is nothing new about new thought. You've heard me say that over and over again. There's nothing new about new thought. Many of our concepts have been discussed throughout the centuries, throughout the ages. Yet a lot of it may be very new to you, to our listeners and people of our ever-expanding community. Much has been said along the same lines by the wise, the mystics, the philosophers, the great minds throughout time. But for us, you and I'm going to move into Barker's lesson. You and I are primarily thinking beings, or to use a larger term, you and I are primarily consciousness. We are consciousness. We are spiritual beings inhabiting a human form for a time in a place, and we're here growing and we're evolving. And as this consciousness, which we all possess, has been spoken of throughout the ages, from Plato, Socrates, and all the way down through history, we have learned about the possibility inherent in great ideas. And yet the philosophers themselves, even though they knew about consciousness and they had all different kind of theories, they didn't know exactly what to do with it. Ernest Holmes, of course, tackled these big ideas, as you know, in the textbook. Later, Louise Hay, in her own way, in her wonderful book, You Can Heal Your Life, offered us many explanations as well. I remember when I was studying Emerson, probably in the early 90s, I was intrigued because here was a man who long before this kind of teaching that we have today that we're talking about, he came into the existence and he knew exactly what we're teaching. What we say every week is really what he was talking about. Emerson's language was from an earlier time, but he was saying essentially the same thing. He was talking about leveling up to a whole different plane of consciousness and existence. Most people didn't understand him anymore. They don't understand him any more now than they did then. His wisdom has endured through the years, yet it is said always that only a few from every age will get and understand him. Emerson seemed to be so far ahead of the world, at least by 100 years or so. And again, I remember long ago, someone saying that to me, a few from every age will understand him. Most of us who are students studied him a bit. I knew I studied him in college, but not on a deep level. Some of his essays were great, but you don't understand them on the level in which we understand them here in the teaching. I mean, if you really take the time with his work, it's breathtaking. He knew all of what we teach better than anyone at the time. He didn't always know what to do with it either, not entirely. Emerson was sick a great deal of the time, and interestingly enough, he was poor a good deal of the time. So even the great Emerson had his blind spots, as we all do. The areas where we are human, that, we all have things that we have to work through, or we're here to work through. We don't have to do anything. Whenever Emerson got ahead, for example, financially, he would take off to Europe and be with some of the great minds like Carlyle and others. And he wanted to be around like-minded people who could support the things he understood, which explains why people in our teaching tend to do that too. We tend to hang together, and because our teaching is a little bit different than what's out there in the street. Going forward with the lesson, once again, when we realize that our minds are somewhat trained to go to the negative, and it's no one's fault, it's just the way it is, we enjoy being plugged in to places like this weekly, classes, and being reminded of the truth so we can dispel and let go of the negativity that seems to be a part of everybody to some degree. Emerson, the great orator, wrote his famous essays, which people have been studying forever since. He's inspired several generations of New Thought students. People who study him and his courses in college, of course, will miss the deeper points that most of us appreciate. And so going to the history of New Thought, just before Emerson, if you go back to the 1850s, there was a man by the name of Phineas Parkhurst Quimby. He was from Maine, and many of you know him to be the father of New Thought. I don't know if that's really true. It's probably debatable, but that's what I've been hearing for the past 30 years. Quimby started to teach that we could change our actual lives by a change and a correction of our thoughts and our feelings. He was teaching at the time in Maine hypnosis and autosuggestion. And after a while, he concluded that people really did not need to be hypnotized. To accept brighter and bigger ideas did not require hypnotism. He thought it could be taught by talking to them and by reasoning and counseling with them. That's what we do here every Sunday, every Thursday. We're talking and reasoning and counseling, and we gather and we share ideas. Now, he predated Freud, and he began exactly doing that. He stopped putting anyone in a trance, which was his earlier training, and he began to talk to them. He said, whatever is wrong with you is a belief in your mind. So that's pure science of mind, before science of mind was here. Whatever you perceive to be wrong with you is a belief in your mind. And if you want to change it to what you want, if you want to demonstrate a different reality, you must change a belief you have in your mind. How simple is that, right? Then he proceeded to teach people how to do it. He developed what he called courage for spiritual treatment. He used the word treatment instead of prayer because the word prayer, he thought, was loaded. It had the connotation of reaching above and beyond to a power outside of you. Quimby said all of that around 1860, give or take a couple of years, and he had the willingness to let go of the word prayer. If you consider the era, that was quite a thing. Sometimes when we let go of the word prayer here, it causes controversy. But he was willing to do that in 1860. And he knew, he was clear that there was no reaching anything outside of yourself. He knew that it was reaching within yourself to a perfect center, and thereby changing the circumference of your experience. The journey was an inner one. Now talk about leveling up. Quincy was like the consummate man for leveling up, and he, that's why they call him the father of New Thought, I'm sure. Quimby said life was made up of divine substance, and everything that's in existence anywhere is made up of spiritual ideas taking form. One of his students later made the classic statement, all is infinite mind and its infinite manifestation. That's everything. Everything is infinite mind, and everything is its infinite manifestation. So translate for me, all is God, right? But eloquently, all is infinite mind and its infinite manifestation. That was the next step. Not only can we change our consciousness, our mind, but we realize that everything around us in the universe is mental in causation. It may be factual in experience, but it's mental in causation. Now the other great thinkers and teachers started quickly coming along after Quimby, like in droves, mostly from Europe, the 1880s and later. Quimby, Emerson really did initiate these big steps, these big leveling up steps. During that time, a great person, Emma Curtis Hopkins, came forward, and she taught many students, the best of the time. You know, she launched several of the New Thought movements. I think she taught half of them, all of them. Ernest Holmes had already established the science of mind in most respects, but he went to her and took some courses and studied with her during the end of her life because he knew that she was one of the greats and he wanted to experience all that he could. And so he credited her with a lot. Raymond Charles Barker thought that one of Emma Curtis Hopkins' greatest contributions and explanations was an amplification of an interpretation by Isaiah. So here's Emma Curtis Hopkins using Isaiah, and she says, "Look unto me," meaning change the direction of your consciousness. Look to me, meaning look to consciousness, look to the presence within. In other words, change the direction of consciousness from the realm of the effects, the stuff outside, all the stuff that we focus on, change it from the outer to the realm of the inner knowing. Nothing is out there in truth. Everything starts and begins within. And so down the line from Emma Curtis Hopkins and, of course, Ernest Holmes and all of the rest, we come. Dr. Holmes, who founded our teaching prior to the passing of Emma Curtis Hopkins, he found it long before, but he recognized her as being one of the greats, and he had the whole thing going on long before he took classes with her. So here's today instruction of right thinking and how to level up. You're going to say, well, haven't we been taught this down through the years, and how come it isn't in the common practice in the world? And Barker commented that he thought theology complicated everything because most of these people were coming out of religious traditions, and the message got caught up in the theology, was his thought. That the simplicity of what we're trying to say and teach was not uncovered or completely uncovered. It's always been there, he thought, plain for people to see who had the eyes to see it. In 1980, I remember the Unity folks were saying, what we teach is the best kept secret of the age. And I remember Dr. Bill Cameron used to saying, God in me, the hope of my glory. And that's going back to the lady, Emma Curtis Hopkins, when she says, look unto me. Change the direction of your consciousness. Look within, okay? So in the early 80s, Dr. Bill Cameron was saying to me, the best kept secret of the ages is God in you, the hope of your glory. People have sought it. They go everywhere and hear everybody, the latest guru, the latest person, everywhere and anywhere, in any kind of book, any place, looking outside. They've looked for saviors, they've looked for gurus, and it's always been within. It's the journey without a distance that people don't often embark upon. It's always been here and within you. Raymond Charles Barker said that he is sure that the great minds that we have known throughout antiquity He noted Jesus and Peter and Job and Isaiah and so many others. He said, I'm sure that all these people had an awareness and practice without even knowing it. Meaning in the sense that they practiced this presence and they had an awareness of it. The mystics certainly did. But they didn't work out a theory, or if they did, they didn't write it down so any of us have it now. With Jesus, there was an interior call, an interior cause in the mind and the heart of the individual. He did teach that. And he said that's where the power is, and that's where creative life is. That's where the power to change conditions was, and that we believe, and that's what we believe now. Your mind, your emotions are the key to your life. So Barker was teaching that, he said, for the past 20 or 30 years. And he said it's a matter of not only believing it, but doing something about it. Your mind and your emotion are the keys to your experience. Okay? It's not just believing it, though. He said it's doing something about it. And you can't stop using your mind and your consciousness because it's in action 24 hours a day. You're using them all the time. So there's really no way out in that sense. So here we have this principle in the practice of right thinking. And he asked the question next, why don't I have what I want? And why don't I demonstrate? And the answer is you can have what you want and you can demonstrate. It's simple. But why don't we have what we want? Because, we can have what we want. There are people in the audience today, in this audience, who, if given the chance, would, if they could reach out through the ethers, would tell us that we're practicing the teaching, that they've healed disease, they've become prosperous, they've healed their relationships. It can be done through the practices of this teaching. It is done. I know some of you who have done it. Across the nation, we have all kinds of metaphysical groups everywhere. There are millions of people who can say, yes, this works, and that they have proven this beyond a shadow of doubt. That when we let go and we take the positive and we stay with it, then the negative has to go. Let's say you love a great opera. Let's say you love great music and you have a ticket to go to the Met this week, if it were open, right? And if everything's going wrong that day and you're having a really tough day and you go and you get into that great theater and you have that experience, you're not worrying when you're experiencing. When you've switched your mind to the positive and the great, you're not worrying. You don't worry at all. You don't remember all the problems. You don't remember the dirty dishes that are waiting for you at home. You're completely taken in by the beauty that you're experiencing. See, that's what we got to train ourselves to do, is to keep switching to the truth and to the beauty and the wholeness. You don't remember the family arguments. You don't remember any of it. But for those hours, you didn't have to. Now, you use an external situation to change an internal condition. Barker said that's why it isn't permanent. That's why he said, this needs to be a practice. We need to be reminded of, we need to keep practicing. He told a story about people coming into the center and they're really getting ecstatic on Sunday. And he said, I wish they would take that cloakroom and check their problems in and come into the Sunday service and listen to the lesson so they could clear their mind of their worries and problems and hear the lesson. And then he said, I further wish that when they leave, that they pass by that cloakroom and leave the problems there. He used another story of the wastebasket in his office, and people would come to him for counsel and give him all their problems, and he would listen. He'd really then say, you can change this, but it will require you leave the problems in the wastebasket or in the cloakroom in his other story, which I won't read the stories to you. Leave the problems in the place where you check them, leave them in the cloakroom. I remember throughout the years being in hundreds of 12-step meetings, which are so wonderful in so many ways for people to level up their spiritual programs. And people can and do share their problems, but the big challenge is once you've shared them and you've emoted a little bit and you've replaced the thinking, is to leave them there and don't pick them up again. Transformation will happen when you can, transcend and you can leave much of it behind. Don't take it home with you, is what he said. The basket has had a lot tossed into it. Leave it there. Let it go and leave it there. Can you level up and leave your problems behind, or do you have to keep dragging them into your present day? I mean, really, you can let go of it. You have the power, once you identify it, to neutralize it and replace it with something better. It's not impossible to think idealistically. It takes a little bit of work, especially if you're habitual thinkers and you've been thinking negative things for a long time. We found out that our individual consciousness, your mind, my mind, when it's spiritually activated, has all the power in the world in it. Spirit, this is a Barker definition, means intelligence in action and motivation of good. What I want is intelligence. I am, and so are you, intelligent. Everyone is. Not everyone is spiritually motivated. So let's level up to a spiritually motivated consciousness that operates with intelligence. Why don't we develop the motivation to have a framework of immediate expectancy? Immediate. We want the good when. Now, not 5 years from now, 2 months from now, but now. That is what I call a spiritual mind in right action. That is what, that is, the way we're to use our intelligence spiritually. So the call is to remember that there is good in operation always. The leaves will come back in the trees this month. We see it everywhere. I've seen the flowers in the streets of New York. Nature never quits, and nature is never finished, and therefore, Barker said, nor should we. It's always moving ahead, and the great metaphysical minds know that. And the great teachers also will never use words like I can't, I shouldn't, I can't afford. And Barker said, if you can't afford something, then don't do it, but get the money so you can afford it. Don't go into debt praising the Lord. He said, pay your bills. But work on becoming more prosperous in all areas. Stop telling yourself you're either too young or too old, or any of these things. He said, all this type of talk is horrendous, and none of us really want to, we won't level up with that type of self-talk. He says, we've convinced ourselves of too many negative things, and we want to be aware of that. Self-limitations, our work is to abolish them intelligently with right motivation. In other words, it's not the mind making a statement, it's the heart responding. Barker said the mind and heart and emotion are the things combined. He said, we can't do everything, but we can do some things. And he says, you invite spirit in, and when you're inviting spirit in, all things are possible. This talk could go on and be a whole seminar. I'm going to close with one or two more things. The question is for all of us today, and this was one of his key questions in that talk, is how are you using your power? Are you using it intelligently? Are you using it with positive expectancy? Are you leveling up? Are you really committed to seeing your life change and change for the better? Because you can only have what's in the framework of your present mentality. Everything else will elude you. So somehow it has to be brought into your consciousness where you can know it, it is for you. We need to expand our expectancies across the board. I deserve better relationships, better of everything, really. And not as a fantasy, but as a demonstratable thing right here and right now. It's got to be that dynamic for you to have it come forth. So everything is possible when you know it's possible, but you got to really know it. It's not good enough to have a wise teacher or somebody teach it to you like I am from the podium on Sunday. You have to know this for yourself. So this is the inner work. Because you alone have the framework of your own mentality in which to work. I can make statements here that can inspire you. I know Raymond Charles Barker did. He did it for years. I've been doing it for years. And every once in a while we say, oh my God, that came out of me. That's we amaze ourselves sometimes with some of the wisdom that comes forth. And we don't even say it's ours. But even all of that, it doesn't do anything unless you are beginning to own some of this for yourselves. Inspiration without practical method of doing something about it is of no value. So we got to do the work. I think there's another expression, inspiration without perspiration. You know, you've got to do something to make it change. We want to get off the merry-go-round of what we've been doing. And somehow, some way, I'm hoping that everybody, or some of you, will begin to take the teaching to a different level so you can level up and to have this first-class existence that, you know, you're meant to have. Please always, as I say to myself, mind my own spiritual business. Realize that everyone's doing the best they can with the information, the understanding, and the awareness that they have. I've been other-referred too long in my life, and perhaps some of you have been too, meaning I get caught up in what people are doing and saying. Groups of people, and truly, I mean, if you go to Jesus, the message was, I'm here to be about my Father's business. We have important work to do personally, each of us, and we don't want to come down. We really don't want to go down. It's easy to grow into the mess of things that are happening in day-to-day living, but you don't have to. You can say no to that and you can ascend, you can level up. I would suggest be not concerned with the things of the world nearly as much as we do, but to be concerned more with our own personal transformation, because we will be of much greater use to the world if we're coming from a centered, sane, intelligent, elevated consciousness where we have leveled up. I'm sure we'll be of much greater use and of service to the world. So that's it today, leveling up, and we'll see you the other side of the break. Thank you.